Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our information session and webinar on the Certificate in Clinical Research. A few items I'd like to go through with you just before we get started here. All of your microphones have been muted, and that's to prevent background noise as the session is being recorded. If you'd like to ask questions, you can do so using the Questions tab in your control panel. I would ask that you hold your questions until the end of the information session portion of today's webinar, because there's a good chance that we'll get to your questions and answer them for you. But yes, please do submit your questions via the Questions tab, and our program team is monitoring that chat and will respond. Also, at the end of the session, I'll be taking questions live for our industry expert special guests. So please do stay tuned for that. Before I kick it off, I just want to confirm with my colleagues, can you see and hear me and the slides okay?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Let's kick it off then. So welcome to today's information session and webinar for the Certificate in Clinical Research in the School of Continuing Studies at York University. Before I get started, I'd like to conduct a land acknowledgement. We recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So my name is Nicole Pereira. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the program manager for the Certificate in Clinical Research within the Continuing Professional Education Division. I'm joined today by a number of my colleagues, as well as our special guest, Taymour Bibi. Welcome, Taymour. Taymour is one of our instructors. He's a curriculum developer within the program. He is an advisory board member in the program, and he's also a global studies leader at Hoffman La Roche. And so he'll be presenting on careers in clinical research at the end of the session today. Welcome, Taymour.
Hey, Nicole, happy to be here.
All right, so just walking through our agenda for today, we're going to start with looking at the School of Continuing Studies at York U at a high level. We're going to talk about what is clinical research, look through a program overview, go through registration and enrollment, student resources and tips for success, and then, like I mentioned, I'm going to pass it off to Taymour, who's going to walk you through careers in clinical research. So at a high level, the School of Continuing Studies is a relatively new institution at York University, formed in 2015. We have, of course, been delivering adult learning for many decades prior to the formation of the School of Continuing Studies. But the formation of the School of Continuing Studies was a very exciting milestone for York University, because this was a centralization of our adult learning and industry-specific training programs, where folks who specialize in training and education for industry-specific applications, for promotion, in collaboration with employers and hiring managers, all came together to build and design programs that are targeted to very established, high demand, and emerging professional disciplines. That's a complicated way of saying that we're really excited about building programs that are really going to have a strong and powerful impact in the labor market, and where there is strong demand and strong growth opportunities and earning potential for our graduates. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about a number of the other benefits of our program, but before I move into that, I just also want to mention that we rely very heavily on what we refer to as cohort-based learning. And the benefit of that is that you're going to be taking this program with the same group of peers from start to finish, and that really helps to solidify that sense of learning community and that community of support, and also to build your professional network for many years to come. Okay, now this is a quote from our Vice President and founder of the School of Continuing Studies, Tracy Taylor O'Reilly. As you can see here, we really are committed to the promotional potential of our graduates, and that's really what we're all about here in the school. So what is clinical research? Clinical research is an area of healthcare science that focuses on the integrity of medical trials. A clinical research professional is involved in the organization and management of studies conducted across multiple phases to assess the safety and effectiveness of medications, vaccines, devices, diagnostic products, and treatment plans. A clinical research professional is adept at interpreting and navigating the regulatory environment and applying legislative standards to the successful execution of clinical trials. Who is this program designed for? So this program is a fantastic fit for those of you who may be internationally educated medical doctors or internationally educated health practitioners. That could be anything from optometrists to dentists to physiotherapists. But folks who have come to Canada, who are highly trained and educated in the health professions, and who wish to meaningfully apply their already existing skills and experience to this very lucrative and fast-growing industry. Also, this is a good fit for trained nurses, such as registered nurses, registered practical nurses, who are seeking opportunities for professional growth and advancement, and who may want to do something different and unique. Obviously, there has been a lot of nurse burnout. The last couple of years have been very challenging, and so this is a very important demographic for us in terms of who we're serving in this program. Next is new graduates and early career professionals. So these are folks, importantly, with a related degree, and we'll talk a bit more in a future slide about what a related degree would include, who are looking to specialize their skills and experience in this growing industry. So you've got a strong foundation in the sciences, and you're looking to specialize and target your existing education into this market and this field. Next is laboratory and medical technicians and technologists who may be, again, looking to move into a related career with significant growth opportunities. And then last is professionals who may already be working in clinical research, but who may not have the formal training needed to advance in that career. So let's take a moment now and go through a program overview. As I've mentioned, York University School of Continuing Studies is very different to our core. We're very different by design. So walking you through what makes this program unique and some of the benefits that are built into this program for you. So first off, this program has been fundamentally led by a world-class program advisory board of leading industry experts representing all facets of the industry. So long before this program existed, York University School of Continuing Studies compiled a number of leading industry experts who have experience from all over the world to pull together and really sit down and figure out what it is that we needed to design and build as a program that would exactly meet the needs and the expectations of leading employers in this industry. Also, this is the only clinical research university level certificate in the Greater Toronto Area. It's also the only blended certificate available. What that means is that this program combines both on live, which may or may not be on campus. It may also be online. We'll talk more about that, with not live or asynchronous learning, otherwise called self-directed. So a large amount of this program is self-directed. You have the opportunity to manage your own time through the program and to manage your competing priorities, right? Whether you have family, whether you're working, so that blended format works really well. But of course, never takes away the benefit of having that live engagement and that very important, face-to-face, virtual or in-person connection. Next is the hands-on practical and experiential learning components of the program. This program has been designed to put practice and hands-on learning first. Of course, it's grounded in theory, but what we're really interested in is upon your graduation, what can you actually do? And that's so important because prospective employers are going to be asking that question. What value do you bring to their organization? How can you contribute? How can you hit the job or hit the ground running? Next is that this program is designed in an accelerated part-time format. It's only 9.5 months to complete in order to achieve your certificate. And so despite it being part-time, which gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of balancing other priorities, it's also accelerated. So a very convenient format. Next up, we've talked about the cohort model, that you'll be taking the program with the same group of peers from start to finish. So that's very helpful for building those relationships, for building a supportive learning community, for building your professional network, like I've said, for years to come. Next is that our curriculum is fully modernized and designed and delivered entirely by senior practitioners in the industry. And with the intention of building this program for the next generation of clinical researchers. So this is a relatively new program. It was launched in January with our pilot cohort. And so this program is all new. It's been designed during COVID and post-COVID. We've taken into account all of the new technologies, all of the new practices that have been developed in this very quickly evolving industry, and that's all been factored into the curriculum to make sure that you are entirely up to date. And then lastly, this program culminates in a capstone course, which combines all of the previous learnings into one group applied clinical research management project. So this is a really exciting addition to the program where you get the opportunity to practice all of the skills that you've been learning and mastering over the course of the curriculum into one comprehensive, practical and applied learning experience. So I want to take a moment and just demonstrate to you who is on our advisory board. So I talked about the advisory board and the important role that they played in the earliest stages of pulling together the certificate in clinical research, deciding who's going to teach this program, what are we going to teach, what do we want our students to learn, and what kinds of graduates do we want to graduate from York. So as you can see here, these folks are very senior and established in their careers, many years of experience. We have folks here representing the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, Apotex, the Hospital for Sick Children, Veristat, GlaxoSmithKline, Janssen, which is a pharmaceutical division of Johnson & Johnson, EMD Serono, Novum, Icon, and Hoffman La Roche. So a lot of big names here. Also, these are our instructors and curriculum developers. So again, really senior experts here. We're so proud of the instructional team that we have pulled together for you. Representation here from Parexel Biotech, University Health Network, Janssen, Hoffman La Roche, Bristol Myers Squibb, and AstraZeneca, all very recognizable names and representing a wide facet of the clinical research industry and the types of organizations and employers where your career might lead you. Let's take a moment now and go through the courses that make up the certificate. There are 6 courses. Most of the courses, or all of the courses, are 6 weeks in length, with the exception of course 4, Clinical Research Operations, which is 8 weeks. And this is the sequence that you'll be taking the courses in. So starting with principles, moving on to regulatory and ethical issues. Next up is clinical trial design and planning, and then research operations, moving on to monitoring, and then finishing off with the capstone. So it's a very logical and chronological sequence to the courses that you'll be completing. Now, one of the things that we talk about a lot in the School of Continuing Studies is not just what are the technical skills or what are otherwise referred to as the core skills to do the job, but also what are the professional and cross-functional skills that you need to succeed in your career. And it's often those cross-functional skills, sometimes referred to as soft skills, that are really the foundation of bona fide career success, advancement, and promotional opportunities. So we've done a lot of work in the program to make sure that we're establishing and developing both sets of skills in our students. Now, through a lot of research and collaboration with industry, these are the cross-functional skills that have risen to the top as being the most important in the field of clinical research. And these are all items and skill sets that you'll be practicing throughout the program. So should you choose to take this program, I just want you to be aware of this, because it's very important that you know kind of where you're going, where you're heading, and why, and keep these top of mind. So reading off a few of them, I mean, we've got critical thinking and problem solving, the patient interaction and interpersonal skills. We talk a lot about relationship and stakeholder management, communication, and one that we hear about a lot is agility and adaptability to a changing environment. This is a very dynamic field. It's a rapidly evolving field, and it requires a lot of critical thinking and problem solving and responding to change. So all really important skills. Now, we've talked a bit about the blended delivery already, and I've explained that blended essentially means a hybrid of asynchronous or self-directed online learning combined with live online learning. It can also be live on-campus learning, and that gives you the opportunity to both manage your time and engage with your instructors and your peers in real time. So this is, generally speaking, a best practice delivery model for mid-career and working professionals and for adult learners. In addition to these scheduled live sessions, there will be additional optional live Zoom sessions scheduled throughout the program just to allow for additional value add, enhanced engagement, and more opportunities to connect with your instructors and your peers. If you're not able to attend those optional Zoom sessions and live sessions, those will be recorded and posted for you so you can access them at any time. Now, in addition to the live training components, you should expect to dedicate approximately 12 plus hours of effort each week for things like readings, discussion boards, practice opportunities, and assignments. As you can probably appreciate, clinical research is a very serious profession, and the repercussions of not performing a clinical research role optimally can be very serious. So this is a difficult program. It's a packed program. There is a lot of work. So please do take that into consideration when you're joining the program and looking at how you're going to best manage your time. Now, there are two different blended formats that we offer this program in. The first is blended online. This is 100% online. You do not need to come to campus. In this format, each course is between 6 and 8 weeks long, and you are learning online. Plus, you have 2 weekend blocks of live online learning via Zoom. So more specifically, this is 2 Saturdays and Sundays in the mornings from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So 3-hour blocks over 2 weekends. The blended on-campus format is the same in the sense that all the courses are all the same length, but rather than having 2 weekend blocks of live online learning, you have 1 weekend block of live on-campus learning. So this is 1 full weekend, Saturday and Sunday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Okay, moving now to registration and enrollment. Now, this is an open enrollment program, which means that you do not have to apply. We do not vet you. You can decide that you are the right fit for this program and you can enroll and register yourself. There are no hard and fast requirements that you have to meet, and you don't need to have our permission or approval to join. This is very typical for adult learning, where we expect that adults have the ability to make informed decisions about what is the right program for them. Now, things that we do ask you to have, though, when you are deciding whether or not this is the right program for you, is we do ask that you have a university degree in health sciences or related. What we mean is this may include, but is not limited to, life sciences, biology, medicine, nursing, nutrition, physiology, anatomy, pharmacy, pharmacology, kinesiology, biochemistry, epidemiology, psychology, or health informatics. So that's a long list. If your particular academic background is not listed, you can always contact us and we can help you to determine if this is the right program for you. Now, if you do not bring a university degree in any of these health sciences areas, we ask that you bring a college diploma in health sciences or related, and ideally that you'll also have some prior experiences in the healthcare or clinical research sector. In addition to that, we recommend that you come with a minimum English language proficiency, and we've outlined the levels of competency that we recommend below. Okay, now in terms of course enrollment, once you register for the program, we will enroll you in all of your courses, so there is no further action needed on your part. Full payment is due before the start of the program. If you have any questions or there are any issues with regards to making that payment, you can email the registration department at regscs@yorku.ca. Important to note that enrollment closes the last business day before the start of the program. However, if it sells out earlier, it will come off the website. So if it's very important for you to be registered in the program, please don't wait to get yourself registered. Moving now to student resources and tips for success. Heads up that there are requirements for your technology when engaging in live online learning. So to participate in the certificate in either format, you'll need to be equipped with a device with a camera and microphone capabilities, high-speed internet access, and a quiet space. The link below will outline in much greater detail what exactly our tech requirements are in order to have a successful experience in the program. Also, and this is a new service, value-added service, exclusively for continuing studies students at York, Career Nexus. Now, Career Nexus is a suite of AI-driven and personalized career tools that are accessible to you anytime, anywhere. There are a number of various programs and services that are included within the Career Nexus umbrella, and this includes LinkedIn Learning. So upon becoming a student in the School of Continuing Studies, you'll have an unlimited membership paid for by the school for LinkedIn Learning. Also, 10,000 Coffees is an online networking and mentoring platform. We also offer resume and interview optimizers, as well as live workshops and coaching sessions. So you can learn more at the website listed at the bottom of the slide, continue.yorku.ca/career-nexus. And then another value add is that students of York University are able to achieve a second free certificate. This is a certificate of completion, and it is offered through our Center for Human Rights, Equity, and Inclusion. So if this is of interest to you, if you take a minimum of 3 workshops, which I've listed most of on the slide in the bullets, you will receive a certificate of completion in respect, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's another value add that you can add to your resume and promote to potential employers. All right, now with that said, I am now going to turn it over to our special guest speaker. Again, senior practitioner, advisory board member, curriculum developer, and instructor, Taymour Bibi. Taymour has over 17 years working in the clinical research field. He's currently a global studies leader at Hoffmann La Roche, which is a prominent multinational pharmaceutical company. At Hoffmann La Roche, he's responsible for leading cross-functional study teams in the successful execution and delivery of large global trials and overseeing a team of global studies managers. Previously, Taymour worked as a global studies manager, where he was responsible for all operational aspects of study management, and in areas including infectious disease, immunology, and ophthalmology. Taymour has also worked at Novo Nordisk Canada, Axon Clinical Research, and Decision Line Clinical Research. Taymour has over 10 years of experience as an educator in the field and holds an honors Bachelor of Science in Biology and Bioethics from U of T. Taymour, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Nicole. Really happy to be here, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. And so, Nicole, if we move on to the next slide, I'll just walk everybody through careers in clinical research. I'll start off by just kind of redefining what clinical research is, just to get a good baseline for us. Nicole started that, but I'll expand on it. I'll speak about the field itself in Canada and what that looks like, and then I'll go into the career portion, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions. So in terms of what clinical research is, a lot of times you'll see a medication, a device, a diagnostic at a hospital or a pharmacy. How did it get there? It had to be vetted through clinical research. And in essence, clinical research is really research in a clinical setting, i.e. Being tested on human beings. And so we take that work very seriously. It's very important that we make sure the products that get out into the world are safe and effective. And we do this for treatments, medications, devices, and diagnostic equipment as well. If we go to the next slide, the drug development process really takes a very long time and has multiple phases. And so I'm going to speak to each of these phases and then go into the clinical in a little bit more detail. So if we look on the left, discovery and development, that's the first phase of drug development. We really look at molecules and mechanisms within the body that can be impacted by those molecules. So we're looking to see how could this molecule be absorbed, distributed in the body, how it will be metabolized, will it have the impact that we're looking on in terms of receptors, will it have the outcome that we're trying to get. And so a lot of work goes in early on just to establish if a particular molecular entity can do what needs to be done. If that's successful, we then move on to preclinical. This is where we do studies in vitro and in vivo, so in cells and then in animals. This is governed by good laboratory practices. We have to make sure that we're adhering to regulations. And we look at things like toxicity and dosing just to make sure the molecule is performing the way that we expect it to. And so a lot of work goes on even before we get into the clinical phase. But once we've deemed the preclinical and discovery and development phases to be okay, and there's sufficient data that shows us this can be tested in humans and it would be safe to be tested in humans, we then submit an application to Health Canada to get their approval. We also go to ethics committees that make sure the study is being conducted ethically, and they would give us the thumbs up to proceed with the research. And in clinical, we start small. In phase 1, those are very small studies, the first one being first in man. And then we go all the way to the larger phase 3 and 4 studies. These happen across the globe with multiple patients and lots of data being generated. So I'll speak to the clinical in a minute in more detail, but once all that study has been done, all that data has been collected and analyzed, if it looks efficacious and safe, we would then submit an approval request from Health Canada, asking them if it'd be possible for us to market this drug in a given country, in Canada particularly. If they give us their approval, the drug goes on to the market. And so just an interesting fact, this process can take anywhere from 10 to 15 years. There's a lot of work and money that goes into this. If we had about, say, 25,000 different molecular entities in the discovery and development phase, maybe only about 250 of them would actually make it into preclinical. So you're automatically losing so much at that stage. And then from preclinical to clinical, we might only see 5 molecules make their way into the clinical phase. And maybe only one get approval and end up on the market. So lots of time spent, but also a high failure rate. And so it's really important to make informed decisions during the drug development process to move forward the right molecules and hold back the molecules that would not benefit patients and society. And so if we go on to the next slide, the clinical phase is what we're talking about. And this is a really nice summary from MD Anderson Cancer Center. So they talk about the different phases of clinical research. So phase 1, as I was mentioning, this is when we start initially. We're looking at the safety of the drug. We're looking at the doses. We do dose escalation studies to see where is the right point where the drug has the most efficacy and fewer side effects. And so we start off in phase 1. There are phase 1 units in Canada that specifically do this type of work. If the phase 1 results look good, you then move on to phase 2. Phase 2 is when you're looking at the effectiveness or the efficacy of the drug. So you now know what the dose is, you know it's safe. but is it going to treat that patient population that you're looking for? And what's the side effect profile going to look like in that patient population? So more patients involved here, but not very large, very focused. You try to see if there's efficacy in the product that you're developing. And then if your phase 1 and 2 are positive, you go ahead and decide to do a phase 3 study. These tend to be much more expensive because they're tend to have a lot more patients. They tend to be global clinical trials. And so now you know your drug is safe and efficacious, but how's it going to hold up in terms of what's available in the market? So you might want to do a head-to-head study where you test this new drug against the gold standard in the market, and you see, is your drug superior? Is it non-inferior? You make those assessments during that phase 3 study, and you're collecting a lot of data because you want to make an informed decision in terms of the value proposition that this medication brings. And so after you've done your phase 1 to 3, could take you 12, 15 years, you submit this to the health authorities for approval. If they agree with your assumptions and your data and your conclusions, they could take up to a year to get approval. The drug then goes on the market. But the clinical involvement doesn't stop there. There's a phase 4 that involves post-marketing studies. So these are studies that are done on drugs that are already approved and on the market, but we look at them in terms of long-term effects. So are we seeing any long-term signals? Are there any long-term safety issues that may come up? And then because the drug's already on the market, you can involve a lot more patients, and so you can get a lot more data. And so in the clinical studies, it's only a subset of the population, but in these phase 4 studies, it's a much larger portion of the population. So you get to see certain things that you may have not seen before. And so those trials are very important as well to make sure that we continue to monitor the drug and make sure that it's safe. So depending on where you land in your career, you can work in any of these phases or multiple phases at the same time. And so I spoke about what clinical research is and the drug development process. Let me switch gears now and talk about the field of clinical research. So it's currently experiencing unprecedented growth. According to Grandview Research, the total sort of market share of clinical research sits at about $44.3 billion US dollars in 2020, and they forecast that that's actually going to grow at a rate of about 5 to 6% over the next coming years. And the reason that's driving all this growth is there's a lot of prevalence of chronic diseases, so there's a need for more medications. We're seeing a higher demand from developing countries for medications, and we're also seeing a lot of adoption of new technologies and new ways of doing clinical trials, and that's coming into play right now. It's sort of the clinical trial renaissance period where because of the pandemic, we had to learn how to do things differently. So for example, previously patients would come to a hospital or clinic to have their study visit conducted. During the pandemic, that wasn't always possible. We had to think of ways to bring the clinic to the patient's home and complete assessments there. So lots of things changing. It's an exciting time. And there's a lot going on. And I have to say, this is probably one of the most regulated industries. There are international guidelines that we have to follow, but also local guidelines and standards. I think probably second to banking. This is probably one of the most highest regulated industries, and there's a reason there. We want to make sure that people are conducting clinical trials in the right way so that the medications that make their way into the market are safe and efficacious. And just to let everybody know, this is a very rewarding industry. So you get to actually help patients and benefit society and people. It's exciting. We get to work on a hypothesis that we want to test and then see it through. It's challenging because there's a lot of obstacles that may come, and there's a lot that we have to overcome. And it's varied. Every day can be very different in terms of tasks and responsibilities that you might be doing. And so just expanding on that and looking at the Canadian lens, Canada captures about 4% of the global clinical trial markets. We do quite a few clinical trials here in the country. We're ranked 4th in terms of our clinical trial status. I think whenever you talk to people around the world, there's this idea that Canada is a great place to do research because we produce good quality work, but we also have really good staff here that have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to conduct these trials. And we also have a really good infrastructure to support clinical trials. So we have medical schools, academic health organizations, and a large number of researchers in this country. And so all that really sets us up for success in terms of bringing in clinical trials, leading clinical trials, and executing clinical trials. And the leading multinational pharmaceutical companies have all decided to make investments in Canada because they recognize all of this. And so I can give you two recent examples. GlaxoSmithKline has just set up a global division here in Mississauga. So they are managing global clinical trials out of this hub. And where I work, Hoffman La Rose has just invested $500 million into a new division here in Mississauga. They're spending that money over 5 years, and their plan is to hire 500 people to manage our pharma technical division, which is the division that's responsible for the procurement and operations of all our drugs and supplies. And so it's going to be led out of Canada, but it'll be responsible for getting manufactured drug to all parts of the world. And so it's exciting times for us here in Canada with all this growth and development. And then this summary is quite nice. McDougall Scientific put this together, but this is a snapshot of our country. So world class in terms of our infrastructure, ranked 4th globally in terms of our market share. 30 days, that is a really good point that helps Canada stand out. So when we submit to Health Canada for approval to conduct a clinical trial, it takes them on average about 30 days to provide that approval. And so that's actually quite quick in terms of other countries. And so I think that really sets us up to conduct clinical trials quite efficiently and not really have delays that may hold us back. We're second lowest in terms of cost among G7 countries. We capture 4% of global clinical trials, and we rank 3rd in terms of our reputation overall. And so if you look at the bottom right, there's quite a few companies that work in the Canadian space. And if you look at the top left, at any given time, there's over 5,000 clinical trials happening in Canada across our provinces. And so what does this mean to you, for you on the phone? Canada is a great place to start a career in clinical research, but not only that, it's a great place to continue on your career in clinical research, and you'll have access to opportunities for growth and development and be able to contribute on a much larger scale. And so where do people who work in clinical research, where do they end up? So there's a few different places that you can find yourself with, having graduated from the York program and having started work in the field. You could be working at hospital, clinics, or universities or research centers. You'd be conducting the research there, meeting with patients, collecting data. You might work at clinical research organizations. These are companies that provide services to the clinical research industry. You may find yourself at a pharmaceutical, biotech, or medical device firm, and so you are leading and setting up the clinical trial that will be taking place. Or you might find yourself at an ethics board or government agency. Those are the groups that review the research and the clinical trials to make sure that they're being done ethically and in an efficacious manner. And so there's different places that you can end up within the field of clinical research here in Canada. And so I started by sort of explaining what clinical research is. I gave you a perspective of the global industry and what the Canadian market looks like. Now I'll sort of switch gears and go into the career portion of the presentation. And I'll start by just giving you some examples of careers that you can start off with once you have the York degree in terms of research management. I'll then show you what progression looks like for those examples. Where could you see yourself in a few years once you've established yourself? And then I'll wrap it up by just talking to you about some other career opportunities that are available within clinical research, not necessarily management, but parallel to management in terms of things that you can consider as well. So let's start with this slide here. So let's say you registered for the York program, you completed it, and you're looking to start working in the field. A potential option could be that you can work at one of the local hospitals as a clinical research coordinator. So your responsibilities would be the day-to-day running of the clinical trial. You would help identify, contact, and connect with potential patients. You would conduct study visits and assessments with them. You would collect study data. You would manage the study documents and make sure that the data was entered into the database. It's really the day-to-day running of the clinical trial. And I appreciated my time as a clinical research coordinator. I think you get to form really close connections with your patients, see them get better and progress. You also get to develop a good network within the hospital or research center that you're working. So it's very rewarding work for those of you who are potentially interested in going into this line of work. Another example is if you choose to become a clinical research associate or a monitor working at a contract research organization. So the responsibility of the monitor is really to ensure that the clinical research study is being conducted accurately and correctly at the different sites. So what you would do is you would travel to various sites to train them on the research protocol. You would then go back to see how things are going. Is the data being collected properly? Are there any issues that are coming up that they need support with? And you would essentially create a report from each of your visits, and those reports are very critical to get a pulse check in terms of how the study is progressing at any given site. Monitors or clinical research associates tend to be home-based. They tend to travel 2 or 3 days a week to the different sites, and then use 1 or 2 of their home days just to get caught up on their reports and answering any questions that sites may have. This is also very rewarding work. You get to connect with a variety of people across a geographical region and develop networks and connections, which is also very important. And finally, my last example is a clinical trial associate being hired at a pharmaceutical company. So in this example, you're entering a pharma company at an entry level. There's a study team that's in place that's setting up a clinical trial, and you would essentially assist them in making sure everything goes well from start to finish. So looking at developing some of the key study documents, updating the systems, looking at study plans, looking at the study budget and timelines, really making sure that everything goes smoothly from setup to the conduct of the trial to the closeout of the clinical trial. And so this can be also a really rewarding experience because you really get to see the study at a very high level, but see it really from start to finish, which can be really nice as well. And so those are just 3 examples of some of the careers that you can get into once you've graduated from the clinical research program at York. But what happens a few years after that? What could you do once you've had a few years of experience under your belt? And so going back to those examples, as a clinical research coordinator, you could move on to take on more senior roles, such as a senior clinical research coordinator, or even a clinical research manager, who's the person responsible for the coordinators at a given hospital or research center. Alternatively, a coordinator could move on and take on a clinical research associate position and take that on sort of moving forward. If we look at the clinical research associate example, the monitor, they could start off working at a CRO, a clinical research organization, and they could move up within that organization to more senior roles. They may end up being a clinical research associate manager, i.e. responsible for several clinical research associates within the organization, or they can take on a study manager role. That role essentially has them leading a study team in terms of the conduct of the clinical trial. They'll still interact with the CRAs and support those that are working on the study, but their primary objective is a specific clinical study. And that last example, the clinical trial associate, they would potentially take on more senior roles within the pharmaceutical company. They could also end up being a study manager at that pharmaceutical company, or they may change their mind and decide, I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to go to hospital and work as a clinical research coordinator, or I'm going to work as a clinical research associate. And I'll just point your attention to the image on the right-hand side. There's really no right or wrong in terms of your career nowadays, especially in the field of clinical research. The idea is that we really try different things to see what speaks to us and resonates with us, and sort of expand from there. And if you get a chance after our call today, there's a really good TED Talk on squiggly careers, this idea that the ladder is no longer, the career ladder isn't something that's in play nowadays. It's really more about trying different things, experimenting, and benefiting from that kind of agile approach to career. So this works really nicely with the field of clinical research because there's a lot of different directions you can go in, and a lot of times people get stressed out about where to start or where to go, and it really isn't the case. Every role will teach you something about yourself in the field, and it's really all about just experiencing different things to make sure that you've got a well-rounded experience overall. And so I spoke about the clinical research management roles, and those roles are sort of involved in the day-to-day operations of the clinical trial, in the trenches, really dealing with everything. But there are other roles in the clinical research field that you can consider as well. And so one of those roles is data management. There's a lot of data that's generated in clinical research trials, and all of this needs to be managed, assessed, reviewed, set up. And so that's the role of a data manager. If you're passionate about data, you can go straight into that field after completing the certificate, or you can start off in one of the operation roles I mentioned and then transition into data management. Biostats is another one. You're involved in the design of the statistical analysis and the design of the study, and then at the end you would be involved in analyzing the data to see what the results look like and what they say about the clinical study. Clinical science is another big one, so you could be involved in designing the study, reviewing the data, liaising with the sites to address any scientific issues that may come up, and it's a sort of very exciting and dynamic role as well. There's medical, so Nicole sort of mentioned this program is geared towards people with a medical degree from, say, a foreign country, for example. You could potentially move into the medical field within a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company. And the idea there is that you're involved in the designs of these clinical trials, but you're also supporting the physicians during the conduct of the clinical study. So there to answer their medical questions should they come up. Safety and pharmacovigilance, also very important. We want to monitor safety during the course of these studies. We want to make sure that if there's any signals or issues that we're paying attention to that. And pharmacovigilance is really around the reporting of unique safety events to the physicians, the ethics committees, and the health authorities. And so there's a function that really focuses on that and making sure that we meet our commitments and are meeting the regulations with respect to notifying everybody when a safety event occurs. Quality, just like any other industry, quality standards are so important in clinical research. We want to make sure that we're building it into every aspect of study execution. And then should we get audited or inspected by health authorities, the quality function supports with that as well. And finally, regulatory. This group is responsible for obtaining and maintaining government approval for a company to conduct clinical research, but as well, when the time comes, submit all that research data for market authorization and approval. So lots of roles that you can start with in terms of clinical research management, but also other roles that you can consider based on your experience and your interest in terms of where you go. And so this is my last slide, everyone. Would clinical research be the right fit for you? You want to ask yourself a few questions. Are you passionate about science and research? Do you have a willingness to learn? Do you enjoy working with people, communicating and presenting? Do you have a strong ability in writing clear documents and communication? Do you like managing multiple tasks? Are you organized? Do you use critical thinking and problem solving? Do you like doing different things throughout your day and working on different activities? Do you have a willingness to travel? And are you agile and can you handle changing environments and situations? And so if you said yes to any of these questions, this can certainly be the field for you. And I just like to stress that I really believe this program will set all potential students up for success. Not only are we focusing on what you need to know to work in the field, we're also pairing that up really nicely with practical, real-life assignments that would mimic what you would do in the real world. And as Nicole mentioned, the capstone, really taking on a project from start to finish and really acting as a clinical researcher will really set you up so that when you get your first job, the tasks that you'll be doing are not things that are new to you. You've actually got experience doing them. And so you can hit the ground running and you can grow your career a lot faster given the experience that you'll get through this program. And with that, I will hand it back to Nicole. Thank you, Nicole.
Taymour, thank you so much. I did want to take a moment and just point you to our contact information in case anyone has any questions and needs to leave now. You can reach us. The best way to reach us is at continue@yorku.ca, and that will connect you with a continuing studies advisor, and they can answer any questions that you may have. But also, we are going to stay behind and continue to take your questions live in the chat, as well as take any questions that you may have for Taymour. Taymour, thank you so much for walking us through that. That was extremely helpful and insightful. And it's such a big industry and it's such a complex industry. So I think that really helps to kind of give us an umbrella, kind of bird's eye view of all of the different options that are available to our grads. First question that has come in is, you've talked about a lot of different pathways. What do you think might be the most likely pathway for someone who's coming as an internationally trained physician?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Nicole. So if someone comes in as an internationally trained physician, I would still suggest that they look at some of those entry-level positions I mentioned, the coordinator position, the monitor position, or the clinical trial associate position. And the reason why I say that is it's great to get practical hands-on experience in the field at an entry level just to get the lay of the land, understand the nuances of clinical trials and how they work. Just a few years getting that experience will really give an individual a breadth of knowledge that they can then take on to potentially a medical position, like I mentioned, working with physicians, supporting them during the clinical study, helping develop the clinical research protocols in terms of medical standards. That can be a very rewarding position for someone. They don't necessarily have to have a physician's license here in Canada to do that work. It's just their experience and knowledge that they would bring to the table, and can add value through all that experience.
Great. And as a hiring manager, as an employer, what are you looking for in a new hire?
Yeah, great question, Nicole. So we are actually hiring quite a few people here at Hoffman La Roche, and I know you and I have talked about potentially tapping into the pool at York to have the students come work here at Roche. But I think it's what you mentioned at the beginning. It's really having the foundation in terms of clinical research because it's such a unique field. So having that strong foundation, the practical experience that gets built on top of it is immeasurable. It really adds a lot of value because it means someone can start working on day 2 and be able to contribute. But what you spoke about at the beginning, Nicole, those soft skills are just so important because clinical trials is all about working with different people, communicating. Global trials have multiple countries involved. You really have to have that team building, that agility, that communication, that trust and collaboration. Those soft skills are so important in this field, and probably just as important as the knowledge that you gain from a program like this one. So I think all of that goes in hand to make the ideal candidate that we'd love to hire.
Great. A related question to the first one is, I have a question coming in from a recent undergraduate student. So they're wondering what their most likely or best pathway might be, where they're coming in without very much hands-on experience, and instead the academic background.
Yeah, so I came in from an undergraduate experience as well. I did a similar program to the York clinical research program, and I was able to get into the field and just start working. So for those that have an undergraduate in a science degree or a related health science degree, there's no problem sort of getting the foundation of clinical research through this program, the practical experience, the soft skills, and then taking an entry-level position. I personally started as a coordinator. Some of my colleagues started off as monitors or clinical trial associates, but just getting your foot in the door, getting that experience, and then deciding where you go from there. That tends to work quite often and work really well.
Great. Another question has come in around, what are your thoughts on certifications like the CCRP, and are those mandatory to get a job?
Yeah, great question. So thank you for asking that. There are different bodies that certify clinical research professionals. So there's SOCRA, the Society of Clinical Research Associates, and you get a certified clinical research professional certification through them. There's also the ACRP, another institution, they have their certification. it's valuable to have that because it really gives you a strong knowledge and foundation in terms of the regulations. And so what could happen is you could do the York program and start working in the field, and then about a year later do the certification and have that under your belt. It's not a deal breaker for a lot of organizations. They don't exclude candidates for not having it, but it's definitely something that will make you stand out and just show your potential employer that you have really strong knowledge in terms of all the regulations and requirements that are needed in our field.
Great. And I know that we're currently still delivering the first cohort of the certificate, which started in January. And I have a question that's come through around what are the job outcomes for those graduates? So we can't really speak to that yet because the students are still about halfway through the program. But Taymour,
Yeah.
if you could kind of project forward, given your status as an instructor in the certificate and knowing the students and what they're learning firsthand, what would you project might be the employment outcomes for our current students?
Yeah, great question as well. So actually, a lot of our students have full-time jobs, and so they're focusing on their schooling. Some of our students have taken time to apply for jobs while they're going through the program. I know 2 or 3 that have gotten positions, one here at Roche. I know a lot of our advisory board members and our other instructors want to tap into the student pool to really hire them on at their organizations after they've completed the program. So we're looking at sort of connecting the dots, bringing the groups together to see how the hiring can happen. But right now, there's a huge demand for clinical research professionals, specifically clinical research coordinators in Canada. That's a big need right now because a lot of clinical research coordinators have left their positions and taken on new positions in terms of CRA or at pharmaceutical or biotech companies. So there's a really big need for clinical research coordinators. And so it's actually really good timing. In the next year or two, that need needs to be met. And as students graduate from this cohort and the next cohort, I think they'll be approached with a lot of good opportunities, and maybe more so than when I graduated a long time ago.
Great. I have a few questions that have come in around co-ops and placements. So I can take part of that, and Taymour, I can pass part of it off to you as well if you'd like. So this certificate program was not built with an internship for a number of reasons. One, it's built for individuals that come with pre-existing education and or experience in the health professions. And so the understanding that we had was that incorporating a mandatory co-op or an internship would actually hold folks back. It's also designed for adult learners, and most of our learners are working. Many of our learners are working full-time, as Taymour has already expressed. And so that can actually be a really big barrier to access when there's a mandatory internship or co-op that could require people to potentially step away from their jobs, which can be very disruptive. So no, we do not have a mandatory internship or co-op tied to this program. Another and very important reason why we did not incorporate a co-op or internship is because after much discussion with our advisory board, with our instructor pool, and working with hiring managers in the industry, the prevailing sentiment was that just because folks did an internship or a co-op didn't necessarily mean that they were job ready, which I know is kind of counterintuitive. But the rationale that we received repeatedly was that there can be a very vast difference in the quality of a co-op or internship. So some co-ops or internships may be doing very frontline, very basic tasks, and some folks may not get very much exposure at all to the field of clinical research, whereas some other co-ops could be a really good experience. But either way, there's a lot of differentiation and there's a lot of variation in the quality of that experience. So what we took away from that was we thought, okay, we want to control the quality and the rigor of the hands-on experience that our students will get. And that's what we use to design the program from start to finish. And that's why every single course is designed in a chronological way. The assignments are very practical and job-based, so you're constantly doing tasks that you would actually be doing on the job in the clinical research field, so you can demonstrate competency and real skills, and then culminating in the capstone, which Taymour and I have both talked about, where you're actually going through the process of executing a phase 2 clinical trial, so that we know, and employers who are hiring graduates out of this program know the standard, the quality, the rigor, and the expectations that our students are going through, and the level of challenge that they're experiencing to be able to achieve that certificate. Taymour, did you want to add anything on to that?
Yeah, no, you handled that really well, Nicole, and answered that very well. I think we gave this a lot of thought and effort, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The practical experience that students are going to get through their assignments and through the capstone will really trump anything that they could potentially get from a co-op. I personally came from a co-op background. I learned a little bit, but not a lot. But what is going to come through the capstone, and I'm personally teaching the capstone, so I hope I would know what's going on. The hands-on experience that you get from that really outweighs anything that you can get from a potential co-op. And so as more students graduate from this program, I think the reputation will be out there that you can hit the ground running, you know what you're doing, and so there'll be a demand for students that graduate from this program.
Yeah, and certainly also the employer connections that this program has to offer. We've talked a lot about who the instructors are, who the advisory board is, and beyond even those two groups, we've also worked with a lot of hiring managers as consultants who have been part of the design and development of this program from the ground up. So there are numerous industry connections to be had in this program. We also bring in a lot of guest speakers. So my recommendation to all of you who are looking at joining this program is to take every advantage that's available to you, to make those connections, to build those relationships, to really get to know your instructors, to get to know your advisory board members. They will be coming into the classroom and supporting some of your learning, both as guest speakers and in some of the simulations and assignments and projects that you'll be undertaking. So some really interesting and engaging opportunities within this program, and opportunities to meet folks and potential future employers. So with all of that said, that brings us to the end of our information session and webinar today. Taymour, I'm so grateful to you for lending your expertise to support our session today and to support these prospective students. And thank you also to my colleagues, Kavitha and Carrie and Farah, who are helping to answer your questions in the chat. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And if you need to get in touch with us, you can reach us at continue@yorku.ca, and we'd be happy to continue working with you and answering your questions. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.